Grow CFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using Grow CFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today, growcfo.net. Hello and welcome to the Grow CFO Show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and today I've got with me an HR expert, Gwenevere Crary. Gwenevere, right?
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm Gwenevere Crary. I've been in HR for over 2 decades. Can't believe it. I'm an HR junkie. I love it. And so about 3 years ago, I built my business Guide to HR. And we're here to support small size startups and nonprofits to give them all the HR support they need, whether we come in as their HR team, we come in and provide an audit for them, we do a project, maybe an RFP for a system or tool, and sometimes we just come in as an advisory while the founder is trying to grow the business. So we love helping our founders really make good business decisions from a people operations perspective. So as they grow the business, they have foundation and they haven't veered off the road and like down the hill and destroyed their business because of people's decisions.
Brilliant. That's getting the crux of why we're talking today, because a lot of our listeners are not necessarily founders, but they're finance folk. Quite a number of them in organizations that start small, are growing fast, and the finance person ends up taking on a lot of responsibilities that aren't finance, ends up looking after property, ends up looking after legal. But one thing that often falls on the finance person's shoulders is HR. And the simple reason is because finance run the payroll. So all things people tend to start being connected to payroll. So if you're talking to that person in finance that seems to have the HR responsibilities for the organization, what sort of advice would you be giving them?
Well, first of all, no one's a subject matter expert of multiple things. And so it's really about having right people in your toolbox or your network so that you can lean on them when things happen, especially when you get employee relations issues, as you start to build the company. What's the culture going to be like? What's training going to be like? How are you going to do performance reviews? All of these things matter. And in fact, as a natural mathematics major, I understand numbers, and CFOs typically love working with me because I typically take on compensation structure as well. So there's a lot of things inside of HR that putting that on top of all the finance, which is a plethora of things that need to be done for a business, it is quite consuming and can be a little overwhelming. So I would just take a breath. Nothing needs to be done yesterday. Think about the game plan, the roadmap you want to put in place in regards to what you need to tackle, not only from a finance perspective, but all the other aspects. So you have legal, IT, facilities, HR. These are all things that putting a roadmap in place will really help not make it feel so overwhelming.
Yeah. So employee size. Start off, those the founder. Founder takes on some people. Perhaps at the point that the CFO first comes on the scene, we might be around somewhere around 10 people, maybe, if we're growing fairly fast. But what do the people issues start becoming a problem? Is it at 10 people? Is it at 20 people?
Well, my mother always says, it depends. I've literally been burned when they had their first employee. And that was because they're like, I promised this person benefits and I don't know what to do. So I was literally brought on before the finance, which is not usual in that scenario. Typically, I see around 25, 30 is a good time to start bringing on an HR advisor or someone who's got that expertise to just help the people in the business make good decisions as they start to grow. A lot of times these businesses will also bring on a recruiter because if they're deciding that, hey, want to grow 50 people over the year, financially makes more sense to bring on a recruiter rather than pay agencies. And a lot of times then a founder or the leader will then use that recruiter as the quote unquote HR person, but a recruiter is not an HR person. They are two very distinct things. It's basically saying that your accountant is also going to be your FP&A person. So could they do it? Yeah, but are they trained? Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the expertise? Probably not.
Completely different skill set, really. Recruitment, HR function. Recruitment, you're looking for talent. You're trying to spot the best people and you're trying to set up a compelling business case for them to come along and join you.
It's a sales role.
It's a sales role, but it's also a procurement role because you're also trying to sift the wheat from the chaff and get the best people. Yeah.
Absolutely. And especially in a startup environment, you need to find people that are not only agile, but understand the workload, understand that they're going to wear multiple hats and actually thrive in that environment. And not everyone does. So it's also weeding out that cultural fit of a startup. And then you add on the culture of that actual business. Do they fit both of those pieces plus the skill set? And are they wanting to work for a company in this space? So it gets really tricky, especially at the beginning. A lot of times the beginning hires are going to be the founders, friends of friends within the founders network. And then at the point in time where the founder has pretty much used up that resource, that's when they start to bring on a recruiter, when they start to bring on the fractional resources and start to use those people's network.
So moving aside from the recruiter, the HR person, what sort of things do you see that person doing when they're coming in around that 20, 25 employee mark?
It's all about foundation. So really the first thing they should be focusing on is building the foundation of onboarding. There have been plenty of studies that people will actually start looking for a new job within 3 weeks of starting to work for you. If your onboarding is not sufficient enough and not robust enough and not setting the person up for success, then you are going to be dealing with people that are constantly leaving you because of that. So 2 out of 3 candidates continue to interview after they accept your job offer. And 2 of the 3 candidates know if they want to stay within your company within the first 3 weeks of the job. So that onboarding is very important. And if you can dial that in, not only from, yeah, I got my W-2 or whatever tax forms if you're international done. I've got my direct deposit information in, have my address, how to pay me. You have all that information. It's beyond that. That's orientation. It's actually who are the people that you need to know? What are the tools that you should be using? How is it to work here? What is expected of you inside of this culture? And then go into the actual job and department and having the hiring manager and the hiring team create some onboarding activities to help support that transition of, okay, round this person up. You can get that all in place. Not only will you have a very positive experience for that new hire can actually ramp up 10 times faster and actually start producing the business faster, which ultimately in a startup, speed is the key. So that is the first thing I would focus on.
Yeah, and there's actually a lesson there for any finance leader that's listening, not just if you're at that 2025 employee mark. No, you're bringing people into your finance team if you're in a much bigger organization. Finance people we know are in short supply, are very difficult to recruit. They're expensive to recruit. So you really don't want the people in your finance team moving on after only being in the business for a number of weeks or months. So absolutely focus on your onboarding process. The first 2 or 3 weeks, critical, whether you're CFO, fractional CFO in a small startup organization, or your finance leader, finance director, divisional finance director, group CFO in a much bigger organization. Make sure that first 3 weeks is spot on.
Absolutely. And I'd actually encourage you to go beyond the first 3 weeks and really look at it from a 6-month perspective. Really, it's the check-ins. How is it going? So I typically will put in a 30-day, a 60-day, and then in the US, a 90-day. Sometimes in Europe, it would be more around the 5-month frame, right before that 6-month cutoff, right? Depending on the different countries. So having that check-in not only with the new hire, how's it going? Are you getting what you need? What are your roadblocks? What are your concerns? What do you like? What could we learn to do better? 60 days after you started, what did you learn yesterday that you wish you had known week 1 so that we could improve the onboarding? But then also having the same conversation with the manager and how's it going? How's the manager experiencing that person? Is the person actually getting ramped up? And what they thought the person would be capable of through interviewing, are they actually doing for the business? So working through that as well, because sometimes, especially in a startup, you don't have the luxury to wait 6 months to confirm that this person is good. It's not you 60 days. Typically, a manager should know, okay, I see the potential. I just need to help them get ramped up better. Or I'm starting to have those, I call them pink flags, red flags. And unfortunately, not everyone, like I said earlier, is a good fit for a startup. Maybe you thought, like, it's the first time they're in a startup, they thought they would like it. Maybe you decided to give them a chance because they have the skill set. But at the end of the day, oh my gosh, this is not the right environment for them. And let's help them find different opportunities somewhere else so we can get the right person in and not wait.
Yeah. And that to me is a sensible discussion, because if somebody is struggling in those circumstances, no matter how much learning and development you give them, it's probably not going to change things. You as the employer aren't going to get the job done that you want. And the individual, I believe that nobody shows up at work to do a bad job deliberately.
Right.
But that person will really struggle to get any fulfillment out of the role. So
Absolutely.
sensible reviews and sensible conversations have to take place.
Absolutely. And in that 30 to 60 time frame, or worst case in the 60 to 90 days, the manager should also be starting to have performance growth opportunity conversations. And I don't mean like, hey, you come in now, here's how you get promoted, but more of like an understanding of where does this person want to go with their career and how can we, a business, be able to support them. And a lot of times what I see startups struggling with is they have a huge power. They don't have L&D, learning and development. They don't have that. Big companies do. What they do have is you get to wear multiple hats. You're in a small environment that you're not going to have to get through all this red tape to do something. Your opinion really counts, and your thoughts on how to do improvements or where we could do something different or add something to what we're doing actually has a bigger ripple effect in a bigger environment. And so those are areas where really what I have seen startups struggle with is helping the employee connect what they do to how it's going to bridge their gap of knowledge and experience to get them to where they want to go. If you don't know where they want to go, then you can't help them understand, I'm having you work on this report. I'm having you communicate with this department head because you said you want to go in this direction, and here's an area that will help you get there. And if you can tie that information in, then the startup environment is such an awesome growth opportunity for people, no matter where you are in your career.
Well, I definitely agree with that. Now, we started talking about learning and development, and that small company really not having too much idea about how that works. And Grow CFO, learning and development is something that we're very big on. We're particularly big on giving people a package of experiential learning that they can dip into. So we'd love to think that we're a one-stop shop for finance, learning and development. But thinking about that startup, how do you get into a learning and development culture?
Starts with the leadership of having the mindset everyone can grow and learn. And is that part of your culture? Is that part of your values? I see a lot of times it is. And then maybe that over time values get redesigned or restructured. But I think if you can put that into your culture, your values, or even as part of like the expectation of the role, the department, right? And how do you do that? That's actually talking about it. It's not like putting it in your values that you hang on the wall or that you put in your virtual background and then you call it a day. It's something that you actually have to live every day. You're talking about it. And to me, what I see or what I try to do as a leader myself is if I'm reading an article or I'm watching a webinar or I'm seeing something that is, oh, that's interesting. And maybe it's something that's just a reminder for me because I'm not new to HR, but maybe this could be something that my HR team would like to know about. So I'm constantly, probably to the point where they're like, can you stop? Because I send it all the time, but I'm constantly sharing the articles and the webinars, podcasts that I'm listening to my team members and saying, hey, this is interesting, but then going another step and saying, here's the things I got out of it. What did you get out of it? And to the point where maybe if there's a big article, we talk about it at the team all hands. And sometimes I will ask team members to say, hey, this seems like an interesting article. I haven't had a chance to read it. Read it. Give me your 3 bullet points. Or, hey, I can't attend this webinar because I'm triple booked. Can you attend? And if so, then tell me what you got out of it. So I'm actually starting to transfer what I do with them to actually asking them to do that in return. And so I think that's how I create that learning culture, because I'm showing that I'm constantly learning. Here's how I'm doing it. How are you doing it? And then encouraging them to go to conferences, get their certifications, do other trainings outside of the startup world, because most startups are not going to have a robust training platform They might have LinkedIn, they might have resources like Grow CFO, but they're not going to necessarily have in-house materials. Now, sometimes based off the business, they might have business specific you cannot get trained on anywhere else, especially if they are a product company. But other than that, everything else, they're going to look outside and they're going to see what's going to be affordable and what's going to be meaningful to the individual.
Thinking about the setting this up for the first time, learning development costs money. What do you think a sensible learning and development budget is per person?
Now, sometimes when we talk about these kinds of things, when I work with CFOs, we pretty much just do a ballpark number and then we let the department head choose how to use it. So I've seen anywhere between 500 to about 2,000 per calendar year per person. Sometimes I've seen just like a flat here, you have 10K for your whole department. I don't like that because not every department is equal size. A larger like engineering department in a product tech company is going to be a lot bigger than maybe your marketing team or your finance or HR team. So I like per person. I think it really depends. If you're not going to provide anything, I would say lean on the heavier side and let your department heads figure out what's right for each person. Hopefully they are doing what I said earlier, which is that they're having those performance review conversations in regards to where does the person want to grow? How can we help them get there? Conferences, as everyone knows on listening to this call, are not cheap. So you're not going to be able to have everyone on your team go to a conference every year. So it's mixing it up. I've had times where I've had one person go to a conference where they had to fly and get a hotel. And then I've had a time where a lower level, more entry level person, I said, look for a conference that's local that you can just drive to in the morning times. There's no flight hotel costs. There's no food costs. It's just the flat cost of the conference. So it really does depend on the person and what they're trying to get, where they're trying to go, and what you see of that person and how you want to help them grow. Obviously, you don't have A stars on your entire department. I wish that was the case. You try. So you might end up giving more money to your high performers, the people that have more potential, would maybe the people who are just checking off the box and getting the job done. But not everyone is a career person either. Some people are literally job people, and that's okay. We need those people. You need those accountants to come in and do your AP and your AR. And it's okay if you don't want to become the CFO 10 years from now. If they do, then great, help them get there. But not everyone wants to do that.
I think that's a very important part of managing your people, your team. Find out what it is that motivates every person in that team. Why do they get up in the morning?
Yeah.
For some, it will be because they want to come to work. They want to come to work, and doing what they do is all part of their route to that great purpose. For others, as you just very well said, it could be they're coming to work for a paycheck to enable them to do a load of stuff that's got nothing to do with work.
Absolutely. And I think it's had huge shifts since COVID, right? We're now post-COVID. And I think you see these younger generations coming in that really are valuing life over work a lot more than some in my generation and maybe some older generations. And so I think that it's really the key, as you said, it's understanding what motivates the person and where they are wanting to go in their career. And I'm not sure if this is true anymore because it's an old article. I read this article years ago that they anticipate the younger generations to have up to 12 career changes. And I'm not talking company. I'm talking like I was in finance. I decided to go to marketing. I decided to go to IT. I decided to go to HR, like significant career changes. And so these people are testing out what they like, and maybe they like it, but they want to try something else that they might feel they might be better in. And so I think it's really understanding that, because you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink it.
Yeah. Or another analogy that I've heard is you can go into fairground and you can go on the up and down horses to start with. But
Yes,
you're not going to spend the whole time in the fairground on the same ride. There's loads of other ones. Yeah.
for sure.
I best find out what works for you. So if we've got a budget put together for learning and development, what sort of learning and development in your experience works best for people?
Oh gosh, there's so many different learning types. I work with a CEO who the way he learns is to read and write everything down. And when I started working with him, I was so overwhelmed by the amount of material that I was expected to consume to understand how the business grows. It was very hard for me. That is not how I learn. I am a communications, I am a doing kind of learner. So it's really understanding the way the person learns. And you literally could have 5 people on your team and they all learn differently. So it's really, that is, I think, the biggest challenge that L&D has is how do you get this learning topic out in a way where all the learning types can actually hear it and consume it. And so I think it's first recognizing that just because you learn one way doesn't mean that's how everyone else learns. And so creating a place where you understand how they learn and then providing outlets for that. So for me, again, learning for me is listening, watching, doing. So conferences are great, but then I need to go and do it. So in-person trainings are great for people like me that need to do it. Practicing. So a lot of times it's like that moment of uncomfortable. Let's practice what we just talked about. And so that's always a good one. So it's understanding that. And then it's and then offering different things. And again, it's tying it back to what are they working on today that's going to help bridge that gap of knowledge and experience. But then what else do they need to do? Is there free resources out there? So for example, recruiting, there's a great community called TALK, TALK, and it's a talent acquisition leader keynote. And it's got a lot of great webinars. And I've sent a lot of my recruiters through that program. It's not necessarily like a program like you. It's literally just a community and they do all fun webinar kind of things. Then there are other resources out there that are conferences. Then there are purchase resources. So for example, LinkedIn it's expensive. It's one of the easier ones to do because it's basically a library of tons of content. So great for a company to be able to purchase a seat for an employee, $50, maybe $100 per person. I don't know, depending on how many people you get and so forth. But then that person has access to leadership, communication, to computer skills such as Excel and PowerPoint. And they probably have a ton of AI stuff now. They also have tech skills. They have marketing skills. So they have a plethora of things. Then it's really a matter of, okay, what do we want this person to focus their time on? And how much time do they have to actually spend on learning and training, whether it's their own content or they're going with a group of people or the company's hosting a lunch and learn. So yeah, I just went down a rabbit hole. There's just so many things to do. And I love lunch and learns. They're great. Bringing in resources to come and talk about certain things that are important to the business or important to that department. That's always great. Or even having a cross-functional lunch and learn. So maybe have your engineering department head or maybe second level manager give them an opportunity to grow and learn themselves in regards to providing some training, but have them come and talk to the operations team, the IT, the finance, the HR, people who are all in the background, understanding what's happening inside of engineering and helping them learn about the business. I think the biggest thing that I see companies miss the opportunity of doing is teaching people business, general business.
Very much. And I am a huge enthusiast of Lunch and Learn as well. I remember doing a consulting project where we had to change the way the budgeting was done on 2 enormous power stations. And we had to get lots and lots of engineering folk to give us the numbers and give us the numbers in a different way. And also give us the numbers during a period where the power station was actually shut down in a big annual maintenance program, which was taking all their attention. And getting the folk in to Lunch and Learns, here's your bacon sandwich, come along and we'll talk to you about budgeting. We'll try and make life easier for you to get the numbers that we need to go through the process. And we'll tell you why we're doing it this way, and worked really, really well. That whole idea, as you get bigger as an organization, sharing across the company what goes on in different parts of it. When you're 10 people, everybody knows everything. Yeah. When you're 50 people, you lose so much by not knowing what's going on elsewhere. That's the danger point where I think all of the individual silos can start if you're not careful. So
I remember my first job was the HR department alone was 150 people. I never talked to anyone except in the HR team. I had no other interaction or connections to the business at all. They never did any like all hands. I never heard from the president or CEO. I think that was looking back, I'm like, man, if I had more engagement outside of my own function, then how much more would I know about business now? It's really getting that in front of people. And on top of it, that 150 employee HR team was spread out between 3 divisions. And ultimately, I was a corporate, I moved into another division. And then it was like that division HR was only what I was interacting with. And so it became double siloed. I think it's hard as you have large companies where you definitely have large finance teams that may even have divisions. And how do you bring the finance team together? And then how do you bring the org together?
Definitely. So I think that there are some big lessons coming out of this for finance leaders that are listening in. Number one lesson is make sure the culture is being formed correctly. And that period where you, finance leader, are probably looking after a lot of people things simply because you run the payroll is an awful lot more critical in the organization's development than you might first think, because that culture is being laid down at that point. That culture is going to stick. Culture once formed is incredibly hard to change, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. Yeah. And the culture usually starts with that founder. And so then there's also, my brain just went in 50 directions on what I want to share here. But one of the key things that I'm actually writing about right now is what you do when that founder is ready to step either aside. Maybe they go to the board. Maybe they decide to step out completely. Maybe they brought a president in and they're co-leading the president. Once that founder starts to step away from the business and however fashion they do, it also can have a huge ripple impact to the culture. And how do you keep that really balanced? And my biggest thing is your culture leaders in place, the advocates, spokespeople, the people who are going to be the ambassadors of their culture. And that, yes, is at the leadership level, but what really has a positive impact is when you take it into the business and you actually get all levels. So managers and individual contributors, you get people who are part of that ambassador group that basically the spokesperson of the culture. It will help to not only keep it going and keep it healthy, it will also help make it thrive. And that's something I see a lot of startups struggle with when the founder is starting to peel back and want to step out.
Yeah, get that. Completely get that. I think the other lesson I'm taking away is get the learning and development environment early on the business. The idea that there's a budget for everybody to go do some training, but also to make sure that you're using the most effective training possible. People's styles are different, but we definitely believe in Grow CFO and experiential learning, putting people in an environment where they can learn from experts in a live situation and they can bring it back and actually implement it in the works the next day.
Yeah. And all of that really starts with your recruiting efforts. If you're recruiting with the lens of culture fit, the values, the startup learning, if you really are like in the startup or even non-startup, really, it's what does it mean to work at your company? And then what does that translate into your conversation in your interviews? And really making sure that you're setting up people, one, expectation, being open and honest and transparent. Hey, startup landscape, we are a hustle environment. It is a very hard place to work, but we thrive in that because we are doing X, Y, Z, and this is our mission. If that's something you can get behind, you're probably going to love working here. If it's not, then it might not be the right fit for you. And so having those open communications, just because you're interviewing someone, guess what? They're interviewing you right back. And so it definitely all ties and connects. And that's all part of the strategy behind talent acquisition and talent optimization.
Yeah, I think a very, very important question for the candidate in that recruitment process. Is this an organization that I want to work for that can develop me in the right way, that's going to give me the opportunities I want in the future? And most important thing is, am I going to have fun here?
Exactly. And I think one question I would love to ask candidates is, if you could create your perfect work environment, culture, what you're working on, who you're working with, what does that look like? And it throws people off a little bit because they're like, oh, but I feel like if you're really looking for a job, you have a baseline of what it is that you're looking for. You want to work with these types of people, or you want to work with this kind of company that's doing X, Y, Z. So I love that question because it's open. It doesn't need the candidate to answer in a way that is going to make you think they're going to thrive, but then they don't. It really helps you understand what they're looking for.
And the place that I think it's really important in my world to ask that question is the finance leader stepping into their first CFO role. We put so much around this CFO job title, getting there, make it a big thing to get your first CFO role. CFO becomes this kind of shiny object. Oh, I've got to grab a CFO role. Right? Headhunter on the telephone, trying to sell you this CFO role that they're recruiting for at the moment. You've heard those magic three letters.
Yeah.
But the number of times then I've spoken to CFOs that have been in the job for 3-6 months, and they're already searching for the next role because they realize that there's much, much more to being a CFO than just a job title. They moved into completely the wrong type of organization, the wrong culture, place that they're just not comfortable, not thriving, not playing to their skills. I think those questions in that first, when you're recruiting that first CFO role, are really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think any C-level and individuals looking to move up into that, there is this bridge of you're going to be more strategy driven. Now, of course, in a smaller environment, you're going to be hands-on, but you're still going to need the strategy perspective. And I think that, again, going back to my comment earlier, companies miss the opportunity to help employees learn about the business. It's the same thing. We miss the opportunity to teach people how to think strategically, how to plan strategically, how to be a strategic partner. And I use that word, it feels like a little bit of a keyword or buzzword, but how to actually change your mindset on what you should be spending your time on and where you need to spend your mental capacity on is so different in a chief level role than even in a VP level. And even if the VP level is the department head in an organization, it may not necessarily be that C level yet of being more strategic or only being in strategic capacity. So I think that's also a place where organizations don't spend a lot of time helping their number twos and number threes understand that, because not everyone is built for that and not everyone wants to do that. And so helping them understand and learn that about themselves is also key.
Yeah. And we've got two big programs in Grow CFO. First one is the Future CFO program, which is all about helping those financial controllers, head of finance folk, be ready to step into that number one role. But then we've got the CFO program, because once folk are there, okay, they probably knew that it was going to be different, but they hit so many issues. Nearly everybody in their first CFO role suffers from imposter syndrome, lack of confidence. Another one we hear about all the time is task overwhelm. They should be doing strategic thinking, but they haven't got themselves out of the day-to-day task thing in order to free up the amount of time needed to do the role properly. They're no longer responsible for the numbers in the business. You've given your number two, your head of finance, doing that. You're out there instead talking to the investors, talking to the customers, talking to the suppliers. It's all very, very different.
It is. It's very different. And also the relationship aspect of being the right-hand person to the CEO, sometimes even telling the CEO no, telling your peers, no, you can't spend the money that way. No, that's not what we're going to focus our time on. So joining me in the herding of the cats and babysitting job that HR has, the CFO has that as well at the higher level with the department heads and even sometimes the CEO. And I see a lot of times the CFO, a really strong CFO, is going to butt heads with the CEO and all the other department heads because they're doing what's right for the business, which may not be what everybody else is going to be happy to hear about, right? Because at the end of the day, you need to make sure there's nothing in the bank account, because if there's not, we can all just go home.
Yeah. So just thinking back on that conversation in total, if you're listening to this as a finance leader and you're realizing that things are on your shoulders simply because you run payroll, and all of these issues that we've been talking about around culture, around learning and development, around onboarding and so on are becoming issues for you, well, think about, is it time for you to get some help?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it could be just something as small as getting an advisor, someone that you can just, a trust partner that you can just call up and say, hey, I have this situation. I was thinking about going this direction. Is this the right direction? Yes or no? Or should I think about something else? Up to the point where then it's like, the thing I really want CFOs, CEOs, any real department head leader to think about is, Are you working on the right thing at the right time to move the business in the right direction? And if you answer yes, then great, keep doing it. If you answer no or I'm not sure, it's probably time that you not work on that. It's probably time that you start putting that off to either another department, another person, or maybe it's just something you should be doing at all, but the business doesn't need you to do it all. And so that's really a key is if you can say yes to that, great, keep doing it. If you say no or I'm not sure, then it's time to think about reprioritizing or delegating it.
Absolutely. Gwenevere Crary, thank you for being this week's guest on the Grow CFO Show.
Thanks, Kevin. It was so fun having you, and I hope all that are listening have a wonderful day.